Hey everyone, Teo here. This is my artist review of the Samsung Galaxy Tab S9 FE. First of all, disclaimer, these are review units on loan from Samsung Singapore. Big thanks to them for providing 2 units here so that I can compare them and show you the differences between the drawing experience and the workflow on a 10.9-inch display versus a 12.4-inch display. Shown on the screen right now are the retail prices for tablets with pen support that Samsung has released in recent years. So FE represents Fan Edition, and the FE tablets are more affordable compared to the Tab S9 tablets. However, several features were removed in order to keep the price point lower. So in this video, we will look at some of the differences and whether they will affect drawing experience. Let me give you the bottom line up front. These are beautiful tablets with solid build quality and they feel premium. Drawing performance is really good. Well, this is the same Samsung S Pen, well, almost the same Samsung S Pen as the Tab S9 tablets. However, depending on the app you use, you may see increased latency. This is Clip Studio Paint and latency is not too bad. Yes, you can see the line catching up with the pen tip, but when drawing, latency is not something I would think about. MediaBank Paint Pro has more noticeable latency, and also when I am drawing, I can see the lines coming out bit by bit. By the way, this display is using 90 Hz refresh rate, so I'm not sure why you can still see that choppiness as the line appears. But you don't see that with Clip Studio Paint. The pen has support for tilt, pressure, and palm rejection. Now this is a sensitive and accurate pen. However, the drawing experience will vary depending on the drawing apps you use. Let's go through the features that were removed from the Fan Edition tablets. So these are using LCDs instead of OLED displays, and there are many out there who prefer OLED over LCD because OLED has more vibrant colors and much higher contrast. However, a good LCD can still look great, and these are beautiful looking LCD displays. Refresh rate is adaptive 90 Hz instead of adaptive 120 Hz, and animation is noticeably smoother compared to 60 Hz refresh rate. So when you are zooming in and out, it looks quite fluid. When you are scrolling web pages, it's also very fluid. There's no 60 Hz stutter. The processor is the Exynos 1380 versus Snapdragon Gen 2, which is 70% more powerful according to benchmarks. You can still play graphics-intensive games, but occasionally there will be the stutter. And this is not the highest graphics settings, but it still looks, I would say, alright. General performance and multitasking with 6 or 8 gigs of RAM, depending on which configuration you get, is smooth and responsive. The FE tablets are slightly thicker and heavier, but this is not something you would notice unless you have 2 tablets side by side to compare. The FE S Pen does not have a battery for Bluetooth features, which is not required for drawing, and the battery is also not required for drawing as well. The USB-C port only has USB 2 transfer speeds instead of USB 3.2 Gen 2. So this cannot output video, which means you cannot use this tablet with mirror mode, and there is Samsung DeX, but you cannot use Samsung DeX with external displays. The last difference is there are only 2 stereo speakers. The volume is loud and the speakers have good clarity and good amount of bass. However, the 4-way speakers have more surround effect. So are these tablets worth the money? Well, that will depend on how much you value the features or the lack of features, and also your perception of value. All I want to say is these are very well-made tablets. Now these tablets actually compete with the Samsung Galaxy Tab S8 tablets, which were released more than 1.5 years ago and are now heavily discounted because they have been out for so long. So I would highly recommend you compare the prices for the Tab S9 FE versus the Tab S8, and if the price difference is not substantial, I would recommend you go with the older Tab S8 because you get like way more features. If you want to get the Tab S8, do check out my text and video reviews, which I will link in the video description below. Oh, one last thing, the battery life is amazing. You can get easily 12 to 14 hours with 50% brightness, which on these two tablets is really bright because the maximum brightness for the LCD is up to 600 nits. And I usually use the tablets at 50% or less brightness. So that was the bottom line, and now let's move on to the full review. Let's look at the items included with the purchase. That's the Samsung S Pen, SIM ejection tool for the microSD card slot or the SIM card tray, quick start guide, USB-C to USB-C charging cable. This is not a video cable. Let's look at the design. So this is the Samsung Galaxy Tab S9 FE and this is the FE Plus. This is using a 10.9-inch LCD display with adaptive 90Hz refresh rate. The resolution is 1440 by 2304. And this is using a 12.4-inch LCD display with adaptive 90Hz refresh rate as well. And the resolution is 1600 by 2560. So there is more resolution here. The resolution is actually 1440p plus, and the resolution here is slightly lower than 1440p. Now for the sharpness, they look equally sharp. I don't see any pixelation from 1 arm's distance away. The size of the icons and the text on the larger display are slightly larger. This design does look really good. The bezels are quite thin and uniform on all 4 sides. The camera is here in landscape orientation. The corners are rounded off. The LCD is also rounded off. The S Pen can be attached here magnetically at the top. The overall build quality is really solid. The display is quite reflective, as you can see. There is no anti-reflective coating. And here at the bottom, there is this connector. This is probably for the keyboard accessory, which I do not have. By the way, the Fan Edition tablets are slightly thicker compared to the Tab S9 tablets, so chances are the accessories are not interchangeable. On this side, there is one speaker and there is another one on the other side, so you get stereo speakers. And the volume is loud and the speakers have good clarity and good amount of bass. However, this is not 4-way, so the surround isn't as good compared to, well, the 4-way speakers that you find on the more expensive tablets. That's the microSD card slot. Some countries have the Wi-Fi only model and some countries have the Wi-Fi and 5G model. And on this side, that's the other speaker, and this USB-C port only has USB 2 transfer speeds. Transfer speed is really slow, and this cannot output video, so you cannot use Samsung DeX on external displays, and for some reason this design of the port is off-center. The smaller tablet has one 8-megapixel wide camera. The larger tablet has 8-megapixel wide and 8-megapixel ultra-wide. On the Tab S9 tablets, the rim of the camera is silver, but on the FE it's black, and there is also the flash, which is available here but not here. And there is this marked out area where you can attach the Samsung S Pen, but there is no marked out area here, but you can still attach the Samsung S Pen. The Fan Edition tablets are using TFT LCDs, and the Tab S9 series tablets are using OLED displays. And here I have the iPad Pro 11-inch with an IPS LCD for side-by-side comparison. And at a glance, I can see the colors on this Fan Edition tablet is slightly more blue, but I cannot tell you which is more color accurate unless I have a color calibrated display by the side for comparison purposes. If I'm just comparing these two tablets, I would say the visual quality for these two is very similar. Yep, they look very similar to me in terms of color vibrancy and the brightness and contrast level. And now I have the TFT LCD beside the dynamic AMOLED 2X display from the Tab S9 Ultra, and from what I can see at a quick glance, the visual quality looks kind of similar. On closer look, I can see the black bar here and here. They are as dark as the black bezels, but I can see the black here is not as deep, it's not as black. But unless you have two displays side by side to compare, it's really difficult to see the difference. In low light conditions is where you can see clear difference between TFT LCD versus IPS LCD. So this is how the glow on TFT LCDs look, and this is how my eyes actually see the display from this angle. And this may not be captured accurately by my camera. And on the right side we have the IPS LCD from the iPad Pro 11-inch, and you can see the black is still quite black. The contrast is much better on IPS LCD, and here again we can see the black is clearly glowing. And here's the difference between TFT LCD versus OLED. So again, you can see the glow is very obvious at night, and this is OLED, and the black is completely black. If you look at the TFT LCD from the front, the image quality is actually not that bad. The contrast is still there, but you can clearly see the black on the LCD is not as black compared to the bezels. I'm not sure about you, but for me, my eyes feel more comfortable when looking at LCDs at low brightness compared to looking at OLED displays at low brightness. But that's just me. The quality of TFT LCDs nowadays is pretty good, except the glow is still visible when you use the tablet at night. Now, viewing angles is excellent. You can see there is minimal color shift when the tablet is viewed from extreme angles, and there is minimal drop in brightness as well. This is TFT and this is IPS LCD. Yep, so viewing angles is comparable to IPS LCD. And the brightness for this is up to 600 nits typical, and you can get the extra brightness mode that goes up to 700 nits. So this is bright enough for use outside under direct sunlight. I can use this tablet at around 40 to 50% brightness in a bright room environment, and that's bright enough for me. So the brightness of this display is really good. This display is laminated, so there is no gap between the line and the pen tip when drawing. Pen tip is firm and has no movement when in contact with the glass. The Tab S9 tablets actually have higher resolution, but even if you have two tablets side by side to compare, it's difficult to see the difference in sharpness. One question that I get asked quite frequently is, should you get a smaller, more portable tablet versus the larger tablet with the larger display? Now, the larger tablet will benefit people who use split screen mode often. Multiple windows are always best used on displays that are larger because you can see whatever you are looking at larger sizes. If you use Samsung DeX on the tablet often, same thing, you can resize the windows larger. If you read PDFs or comics often, I would probably recommend you get the larger display, because with PDFs and comics you cannot enlarge the text size. So on the larger display, you get to read the text at larger sizes, which is, in my opinion, more comfortable for my eyes. However, the text size on the smaller display is still big enough. If you want to use your tablet as a wireless external display, I feel like having a bigger display is better. When you rest your palm on the larger display, it's going to cover a smaller proportion of the display compared to resting your palm on a smaller display, which will cover a larger proportion. If you're using your tablet mostly at home, you don't really have to worry about the extra weight. Let's talk about performance. So this tablet is using Exynos 1380 processor, which has 8 cores. Sure, this processor is not as fast or as powerful compared to Snapdragon Gen 1 or Gen 2, but for general use, this processor is very responsive. You can get the tablet with either 6 or 8 gigs of RAM, and this review unit has 6 gigs of RAM, which is more than sufficient for smooth multitasking. And everything just feels very fast and responsive, and the 90 Hz refresh rate also makes everything feels very snappy. You may see or feel the limitation with the processor when playing graphics intensive games, and there may be the occasional drop frames or stutter but overall gaming experience is still very enjoyable. And of course, you will not be able to play games at the absolute highest graphics settings, but the visual quality for games, at least for this game, still looks pretty good. This is the S Pen that's included with the FE tablets. So this physical design is similar to the Tab S9 S Pen. The only difference is this pen has a battery inside for Bluetooth features, which are not needed for drawing, and I don't use those Bluetooth features anyway. So this pen does not have a battery, and you don't need a battery for drawing, and because there is no battery, you don't have to charge the pen, and you don't have to pair this pen with the tablet for drawing and for writing. The build quality is quite solid. It has a nice matte textured surface, which is quite comfortable to grip. This pen is comfortable to hold for long periods of time, and that's the one side button, which may be configurable depending on the app you use. The pen tip is slightly rubberized, so it has some resistance on glass. When writing and drawing, it doesn't feel that slippery, and also when you tap the pen on the display, the sound is dampened. There are no replacement pen tips included, but those are easy to find and are very affordable. So you can get the rubberized pen tips or the plastic tips, which are smoother on glass and better for writing. And nowadays there are even metal pen tips. I've not used metal pen tips on Samsung tablets before, so I can't say whether they will damage or scratch the glass. On iPads, it seems fine. Alright, time for some line tests. Drawing experience with Medibank Paint is not good due to the increased latency, but for other apps, they work fine when drawing at normal speed. Let's test the initial activation force, so that's how thick the line really is. And I am holding the pen from the back. I'm not holding the pen this way, I'm holding it from the back so that I can draw with minimal pressure. And I can draw the thin lines very easily. And I'm drawing the lines as slowly as I can, and I don't see noticeable wobble. Oops, the line broke there. Yep, so there is very minimal jitter, if any, and there is no noticeable wobble with the slow diagonal lines. Let's see how the lines taper. They taper very smoothly, very sharply. And this is the nice kind of taper because it starts slightly thinner, becomes thick, and tapers very smoothly and sharply. Line transition from thin to thick. This is also a diagonal line, so I don't see any diagonal line wobble. The line transition is smooth. And this is actually the true pressure sensitivity test, because for pens that are sensitive, you should be able to draw thin lines after drawing the thick lines, and this pen is able to do so. Let's see if we can maintain consistent line width by maintaining consistent pressure. And yes, I can do so. No problems with drawing dots. Let's see whether there is any cursor misalignment depending on how I hold the pen. So if I hold the pen almost vertically, the cursor is directly beneath the pen tip. And if I hold the pen at an angle, the cursor is still directly beneath the pen tip. So I'm actually drawing separate lines and trying to join those lines without the lines overshooting, and I am able to do so because there is no cursor misalignment. If there is cursor misalignment, it's going to be very difficult to join the lines properly. So the Samsung S Pen is sensitive and accurate. The performance is consistent and predictable. Let's look at the latency performance. So there is noticeable latency. There is actually more latency compared to the Tab S9 tablets, but this app, Medibank Paint, usually has more latency compared to other drawing apps. This is Infinite Painter, so there is also latency. However, the latency performance seems to be slightly better compared to Medibank. Another thing I noticed with Mini Bank Paint is when I'm drawing, I can see the line appearing bit by bit. Yep, I can definitely see that. And this is Clip Studio Paint, and I can see latency as well. But the line doesn't appear bit by bit. This is Concepts, and there is slight latency, but overall performance is not bad, and tilt works. Let's look at the latency for Kritar. So this app is best used with a larger display because there are so many user interface elements, and the latency performance is normal. It's not that fast and it's not too slow. It's good enough. I have a request from someone to test the latency for high paint, and the latency is okay. The latency is good enough. I will have no issues drawing with this. Latency for sketchbook is alright. No issues here. This is heavy paint. Latency looks alright. And this is Samsung Notes. And I am not able to see any gap between the line and the pen tip, so the latency with this app is excellent. And now I want to talk more about drawing experience. So if you use drawing apps with lots of user interface elements such as Kritar or Clip Studio Paint, I would say go with the larger tablet because you get more resolution to put the palettes by the side, and you still get a good amount of canvas space to work with. And also on a larger tablet, when you have your palm on the display, you will still see a good amount of display, whereas when you have your hand on a smaller display, it actually covers a larger portion of the display because the screen is actually smaller. The smaller display is best used with drawing apps that have minimal user interface, and Clip Studio Paint happened to the smaller 10.9-inch display is better for use with drawing apps that have minimal user interface, and Clip Studio Paint actually released the Simple Mode UI recently. So now you can hide the UI into the buttons, and this is how it looks. So you get more drawing space and less UI for the tools and for the palettes. If CSP is your main drawing app, do note that this Simple Mode UI does not have all the tools and features that you can get with the full Studio Mode UI. Right, let's draw something really quickly to show off the pen performance. So let's draw thick and thin lines. Let's draw the thin line here. Oh, this pen actually supports tilt, which is great. This app is Infinite Painter, and the brush I'm using is the dry inker brush, so I can tilt the brush to get the dry brush effect and the broader strokes. The latency performance here is pretty good. So this is my usual drawing speed. Let's have the tapered strokes here. Yep, they look great. And this is actually quite responsive. I mean, there is latency, but latency is not something I would think about when I am drawing. What I think about is whether I can get the thin and thick lines, the versatility of the brush, and I can get that with this pen and this tablet. The basic navigation gestures are supported, obviously, and the zooming in and out, as you can see, is quite fluid. But of course, this is just very simple line art. You can zoom in and out very fluidly with heavier or more detailed artworks as well. Let's zoom in closer. So this is the 10.9-inch display, and I definitely have no issues drawing with this size. But of course, I'm drawing on a table right now, so I can rest my palm out of the display. If I'm using this tablet on location, if I'm using this tablet outdoors at a cafe, yeah, I can stand and hold this tablet to draw, no problem. You can of course rest your palm on the display. Palm rejection works really well. By really well, I mean, oops, I did not turn on pen mode, which also demonstrates that palm rejection works really well because I did not turn on pen mode and I did not introduce any stray strokes with this drawing so far. So let me enable pen mode. Okay, pen mode is now enabled. So if I draw with my finger, I will not be able to introduce any stray strokes. And also when I rest my palm on the display while drawing, sometimes there can be two parts of my palm that is in contact with the surface. It's like two fingers in contact with the surface. But even so, there will not be any unintentional finger gestures, which is great. So once you get the hang of how the app works, you will be able to draw quite fast. There is no Procreate from the Google Play Store. Procreate is iPad exclusive, but there are still plenty of wonderful drawing apps from the Google Play Store, such as Infinite Painter. There is Clip Studio Paint, Concepts, which is one of my favorite sketching apps. There is Sketchbook. This 10.9-inch display will work great as a portable sketchpad. Now I have the tablet flat on the table, so this is actually not very ergonomic for drawing. I highly recommend you get a proper tablet stand so that it's better for your posture, especially if you have to draw for long periods of time. Infinite Painter is a very capable drawing app and it's a one-time purchase. It's not Procreate, but it's still pretty good. Procreate definitely has more features. Procreate has more support for finger gestures. But even for Infinite Painter, it has, I would say, most of the tools that you will need for drawing and for digital painting. So this is a really quick sketch, and the lines are able to come out exactly the way I expect them to. So as mentioned earlier, the drawing performance is predictable and very consistent. And here's another sketch. This was drawn with Concepts, which is a vector illustration sketching app. So with vector art, you can zoom in all the way and the details will be retained. You will not get that pixelated look, which is one thing that I really like about this app. Now this app does not work that well with pressure. Oh, by the way, notice as I zoom in and out, as I zoom down, you will see the white box around. That is due to the app, it's not due to the tablet. Okay, this app does not work well with pressure brushes. I mean, it doesn't work as well with pressure brushes compared to other apps. So the overall drawing experience will also depend a lot on the apps you use. For this app, I like to use the pencil brush because it has very nice pencil textures that look very appealing to me. And this app is quite responsive. I don't see, I mean, there is latency if you are looking for latency, but when drawing, as mentioned earlier, latency is not something I would think about while drawing. This app is still very responsive. This pen is not affected by diagonal line wobble or jitter, so it's accurate and it's sensitive. There are no surprises when drawing. I would say the pen performance is definitely good enough for creating professional manga art. For me, I like to use tablets for sketching. So here's the overall look of the sketch. I also have some notes by the side. By the way, I actually have an online course on drawing with concepts. So if you want to learn how to draw with this app, you can check out my course on Skillshare or Gumroad. The link is in the video description below. And this is a really wonderful app that I really enjoy working with. So these are some of the artworks that I have created with the app. Here's how the sketch looks on a smaller versus larger display. If you zoom in at the same zoom, you can actually see more content on the larger display because there is more resolution to show more content. So you get a better overview of your art here while drawing. I mean, you can zoom out to see the overview. It's just that at the same zoom, you definitely can see more content on the larger tablet. Battery life is exceptionally good. You can get around 12 to 14 hours with 50% brightness. The battery life of the Fan Edition tablets is noticeably longer compared to the Tab S9 tablets. Maybe it's because the processors don't use as much power or the display is more efficient. I'm not sure about that. Either way, the battery life is conclusively much better compared to the Tab S9 tablets. Alright, to conclude, are these tablets worth the money? Well, you can decide and let me know in the comment section below. If I have to spend money to buy either tablets, the Tab S9 FE or the FE Plus, I would definitely compare them with the Tab S8, which were released in 2022, early 2022, so that's more than 1.5 years ago. Tab S8 will provide way more features compared to these two tablets. However, the limitation with the Tab S8 is there is no IP68 rating. The battery life is shorter, but still good. And you can get 4 years of Android updates and 5 years of security updates with Samsung tablets. So for that tablet, the Tab S8, the major OS, the Android OS updates will end in 2024. However, just because you don't get Android updates anymore doesn't mean your tablet is going to stop running. You can still use the apps that you have. You can still install the apps or whichever apps you want from the Google Play Store. So having shorter Android OS updates for the Tab S8 is not really a major downside. If you want to compare this with the Apple iPads, the iPad 9 and the iPad 10, these tablets do offer more value compared to the iPad because with the iPad you only get 64 gigs of storage, which means you have to spend more money to upgrade the storage because iPad OS takes up maybe 15 gigs of storage and there is no micro SD card slot and you have to buy Apple Pencil separately, so that's a lot of extra cost with the iPad. And the iPad does not have a laminated display. The advantage of the iPad is if you are using other Apple devices, then you get the Apple ecosystem to work with the iPad. And iPads have better graphic design apps that handle vector, typography, and layout. So that's the iPad advantage. But for drawing purposes, there are many wonderful and capable drawing apps from the Google Play Store. So for drawing purposes, Samsung tablets and iPads are on par. Before you go, I want to ask for a favor. If you have the intention to buy these tablets, consider using the affiliate links in the video description below to support my YouTube channel and the work that I do here. Alright, see you guys again. Bye.